Welcome, Traceable designers. Today we're making a scalloped cornice style pillowcase valance. I'm going to show you an easy way to add fabric to your side panels so you can make the standard large side panels. You can make this valance with a single center panel or any number of center panels needed to fit your window size. Before you begin, pull out your pillowcases. Each one will have a slightly different print, and I'm trying to center the bird, so I'll pull out the best fit for my centered bird. And when I'm making my center panel, which is what I'm sizing first, that's a little shorter, so you'll be able to slide that around to get the appropriate sizing. Now, this is a large pillowcase, so I only have 36 inches, so I have to make sure that when I do the positioning, I keep in mind that I will fold the center panel over the rod, raising it by about an inch. So based on fabric print, pick the best center panel for your valance, and then you're going to be making a small center panel. Unfortunately, that's the biggest you can make, or the largest you can make with a large pillowcase. So you'll go ahead and make a smaller one using the small sizing line. Now for the side panels, we really want to try to keep this curve. So you have two options. If you do a smaller side panel, it just isn't going to look as nice. So I recommend that you position your design form so that the side return is wider, and then you'll just adjust the inside to make a little bit more narrow panel. That way when the panels overlap, you really won't see that underneath, so you don't really miss that curve, but you do have the nice curve around the sides. So in order to adjust for a large side panel, I've selected a dual fabric design. Now what's great about this is it already has a seam down the middle. It makes a really pretty two fabric section, and I'm going to be able to use the largest outside sizing line for 22 inches without having to remove any width from my panel. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to open up my pillowcase so that I have a much wider section. So with my print here, I want to try to pick the side that has the most design. So I'm going to keep that in mind when I cut my pillowcase. So I'll cut the short edge, and then I'm only going to cut along one side of the pillowcase, so I have an extra wide section for my side panel. Once your pillowcase has been open, you're going to use about 3 inches of the side panel. It's going to be on the contrast fabric, which was the extension that we created, and then the balance of the panel will be on the other side. So we're going to need to size our fabric so that we have a little margin around all edges. I'm cutting around the entire design form because I am making a rod hanging pocket, so size that with a couple of extra inches so you have plenty of room. Then just run an iron over your fabric to make sure it's nice and flat. And you can see here I've turned my fabric upside down, and I'm trying to position my design form where I can get or capture most of the design. I want to also make sure that I'm positioned along the edge so that I have 3 inches beyond the seam for the extended fabric section. So now I'm just positioning my fusible backing along the rod pocket positioning marker, making sure that I have plenty of heat and bond covering the entire fabric section so that when I trace, I'm tracing on top of fused lining. So once that's in place, then you're going to turn your steam off of your iron for a dry iron and a medium-high heat, and then just begin in the center with a sweeping motion out toward the sides. You want to make sure that stays straight for your rod pocket section on top, and take your time until the backing has completely fused to the back section of your fabric. Then once that backing has cooled 100%, then you'll be able to peel that off to expose the glue, and then we'll add our lining. You can use a white cotton pillowcase, or you can use any white cotton lining to add to the back of your side panel. So you'll just cut a very straight edge on top, and then you make sure that your lining goes beyond all the edges. You want to make sure you've covered all the glue. And then again, beginning in the center with a sweeping motion out toward the sides, then you're just going to carefully attach your lining to the back of your side panel. So since I'm making a left side panel first, I'm using my design form upside down. So the most important thing is that I position the side line, my small sizing line, over the seam for the extra section for my side panel. So to get that nice and straight, make sure that you position along the lined fabric positioning marker and then you make sure that your small side panel is right alongside of the seam. And then we're going to begin tracing on the straight side, which is the wall side of the panel. So trace straight down the side and then just follow the curved line underneath over to the opposite side. Just make sure when you trace that you can really see that line really well. So take your time tracing around the design form and hold that nice and flat and firm so it doesn't move. And then once you've finished tracing around the curved lower edge, then we're going to lower the entire fabric section and then trace off the rod pocket section. So you'll trace up the left and right side of the upper section and then straight across the top to mark the panel height cut line, which will make a 3-inch wide pocket for your curtain rod. To cut out your side panel, you'll just follow your trace line. So cut very carefully along the curved lower edge and of course up over the rod pocket section along the straight wall edge and across the top of the rod pocket to mark the panel height cut line. You will be making a 3-inch wide pocket for your wide pocket rod. And then remember, you need to repeat this entire process for your right side panel. Now to make your right side panel, you'll size your fabric again, follow the same steps, but you will be tracing the design form with the printed side facing up for the right side panel. So as you can see, I have a perfectly sized 22-inch wide side panel, so this will curve nicely around the rod return, taking up about 4 inches of the side panel. So then to move on to your rod pockets, once you've made your left and right side panel, you'll just fold the unlined fabric section over to meet the top edge of the lining, don't overlap, and then cut fusible backing to fit inside of that section. You don't want to overlap onto the lining or onto the ironing board, or you'll get glue on your ironing board and that can get on the front of your valance panel. So if you have to cut a couple of different pieces, do that. And then once that has completely cooled, you'll peel off the paper to expose the glue, then fold that rod pocket over, pull it kind of tight over top of the lining and fuse that down. That will take a little more time with the iron because you're fusing through several layers of fabric. So once you get that nice and secure, then you'll be ready to move on to your center panel. So for your center panel, pull out your other pillowcase and you're going to need to completely open this, cutting around all the edges. So if you have a fold or a envelope style, you'll cut that off and then cut around all seams. So you may want to just actually iron it kind of flat so you can really see the seams. And then you'll just cut around all the edges, trying to keep as much width as you possibly can. Since this is a king size pillowcase, the measurements are 20 inches deep by 36 inches wide. So you want that to be as wide as possible so you can make your center panel. So now I'm ready to make my center panel. I want to make sure that that's ironed nice and flat to get rid of all the wrinkles. You can see that I have my bird centered in the middle. So now I'm going to revisit that positioning. So of course we're using the top edge of the center panel for sizing, and we're also using the small sizing line. So I'm just trying to figure out where to position my heat and bond so I can capture that print the way I like. So I've cut a piece of fusible backing that is as wide as possible because I'm trying to get as wide a center panel as I can. And again, with no steam, on a dry iron from the center out, I am fusing down my fusible backing. There is no rod pocket, so I'm using the full 17-inch deep section and I'm just fusing it across my fabric. Once that's cooled, just peel off the paper to expose the glue, and then we'll move on to adding lining. Now remember, the lining here is going to be extending past all the edges, top, bottom, left, and right, because we do not have a rod pocket. So set that paper aside. You'll use that to cover your ironing board when you add your trim. And then cut another piece of lining. This lining needs to go around all the glue to cover every bit of the glue. And then again, starting in the center with a sweeping motion out toward the sides. Always center out so you remove all the buckling. And then once you get that fused to the back, just flip the fabric over and make sure to get rid of any wrinkles on the front. Just run the iron carefully across the front side of the fabric to make sure that's nice and smooth before we move on to tracing the center panel. So fold your fabric section in half with the lining side facing out and make sure the print direction is correct. And I'm using the 17-inch wide sizing line, so that's going to be positioned along the folded fabric edge. And then we're using the top edge for the center panel, which is the 15.5-inch arrow on the outer right side to begin tracing. So we make sure that that's nice and straight on the fold, and then we're beginning at the 15.5-inch line. Put a little mark there so you'll know where to lower your design form when you're finished tracing underneath. So trace the design shape all the way around to the folded edge. Make sure you can clearly see your line. If you run into a pin, you can just remove that. And then when you're finished tracing to the folded fabric edge, you're going to carefully lower the design form, making sure that you're straight on the fold. So you'll make sure your sizing line remains along the fold, lower your design form down to your original mark, and then you're going to trace across the top edge of the design form to mark the panel height cut line. To cut out your center panel, just turn the folded edge facing you and then carefully follow along the curved lower edge and up the right side. I suggest pressing down on the fabric to keep it nice and flat as you're cutting along the traced line, and then turn the fabric so that the cut side is facing you, and then just cut straight across the top for the panel height. Then open up your panel and then just run an iron over the center panel to make sure everything is secure. You can see that my print is perfectly centered in the middle. Then you're going to use edge trim. I'm going to start with the side panels and just measure that off so that you have the right amount of trim before you begin. Pull out that paper that you reserved from the backing, and then we're going to set that on the ironing board so that's protected from the glue. So for the side panel, I'm going to follow along the curved section first, and then I'm going to do the wall side. So I have a flat gimp trim here, a braided gimp, so I'm just running that underneath the iron so that that is nice and flat and easier to attach. I'm also using tube glue. You can use different kinds of tube glue. Anything works. I like the Unique Stitch because it dries clear and it's a fast drying, and I don't have a very heavy trim, so I don't need a super hold. So just follow along the very edge of your panel, and I like to work in sections, usually up around the first curve or toward the first curve to begin. To attach your trim, extend it just a little past the outer edge, so you'll put about 1 inch beyond the edge, and then just follow along the glue. So you want to just take your time with this. The glue does start to dry, but you still can reposition the trim. Make sure that it's perfect. That really makes a difference in how professional looking your panels will be. You can also check from behind to make sure that you are actually following the curve. Just reposition, moving in sections until you've completely secured your trim to the lower edge, and then you'll snip off the trim at the top and then also flush with the straight side of the panel. Then just put your glue right along the straight side of the panel, and then when you are attaching your trim, pull it taut and straight and just right across the panel. Then you'll just secure that below underneath the corner, and then you'll also fold that over and glue that to the back side of the rod pocket. Then once you've finished both of your side panels, you move on to the center panel. Same process. Extend above the upper edge just by about 1 inch. Follow the curve all the way around, nice and even, and then just secure the loose edges behind the panel. Okay, our final step is to prepare the panels for hanging. You do have a rod pocket on your side panels, but then your center panel is going to fold over your side panels and secure to the back of the rod and the back of each side panel. So we'll be attaching Velcro to the back of the panels. You do have Velcro included in your kit. You also have push pins for holding your side panels nice and straight. So you're going to cut a piece of fusible backing that's about a 1/2 inch wide, and that's going to be fused across the top edge of the lining on the back side of the center panel. You do need the fusible backing and the exposed glue in order to securely hold your sticky back Velcro. So we're doing the soft side Velcro on the back of the center panels. So once your paper has cooled, you'll remove the paper to expose the glue. Then cut a piece of sticky back Velcro, which sticks immediately. So you want that to fit the width of the back of the panel. So when you're attaching this, you have to be really, really careful. So just press down flat without allowing the panel to buckle at all. So you don't want to pull at all on the Velcro, or you will cause a permanent buckle on your panel. So remove the paper in sections and then just pull this section across the back, and then you're just going to use your hand to flatten down the Velcro so that it doesn't cause a buckle. So do this really slow and really carefully, and you'll get that on there nice and flat. So then for the side panels, for the curved side, not the wall side, where the center panel is going to overlap, you're going to do the same thing. The only difference is you're using a smaller piece of fusible backing and a smaller piece of Velcro. And on the back of the side panels, you'll be putting the hard side Velcro. So if you have a lot of panel overlap with your center panel, you might need a little wider piece of Velcro. So the hard side Velcro then is just secured to the exposed glue. So when that folds over, it will secure to the back of the rod and the back of the side panels. So in addition to your side panels, you also need to prepare your rod. So you can take small sections of the hard side Velcro and secure those inside of your rod between the side panels. Then simply slide the rod through the side panels and secure those against the wall, and then you will fold your center panel over your rod and secure to the back of the side panels and the back of the rod. Thank you for joining me, Traceable Designers, and remember, you can always make your mark with Traceable Designer.